I'm Ron Gacious, and I am going to serve as a temporary chair to get our meeting started. This is the City of Lawrence, Kansas Affordable Housing Advisory Board, and today is our May meeting, and it's 11:01 by my clock. My name's Ron Gacious, and I am the Chamber's nominee to the advisory board, just starting my 4th year on the board, and had served the previous 2 years as chair, which is why I've been asked if I would sit in and help start this meeting. I don't have a list of board members in front of me. Does one of the staff have a list of board members and could call names to do a roll call for us?
You want me to do that?
Yes, we can do that for you. Do you have it in front of you, Leah?
I do.
Okay.
Okay, Cole Brown. Rebecca Buford.
Present.
Ron Gacious.
Present.
Christina Gentry.
Present.
Edith informed us she would be absent. Thomas Howe.
In attendance.
Paul Newsome. Dana Ortiz.
Here.
Shannon Oury.
Here.
Shannon Reed will be absent. Looks like Monte. Hi, welcome.
I made it.
You made it.
I made it here.
Yay. Sarah Waters.
Here.
And Erica Zimmerman.
Here.
My power grab is over. You're back.
Well, I got excused for my other meeting. So, give me a second here. I'm looking to pull up the agenda because
I think that the next step, Chair, would be probably to read our information about the meeting. So if you want me to go ahead and do that while you kind of get settled in.
Please do. Thank you.
Okay, sure. This meeting is being recorded and broadcast on the city's YouTube channel and public access cable channel 25. During the meeting, when you are not participating, please mute yourself by clicking on the microphone icon found on the lower left-hand side of the Zoom menu next to the video icon. When you are muted, a red line will appear over the icon. Muting your microphone during the meeting will make it easier for everyone to hear. You'll just have to remember to unmute yourself if and when you want to speak. In some cases, we may be able to mute or unmute people as needed just to minimize the distractions during the meeting. Please remember to state your name every time you speak for the benefit of those listening to the meeting remotely. You can turn your video camera on or off by clicking the video icon in the menu. For purposes of the public meeting, when you are participating in the meeting, please keep your video on. When you are not participating in the meeting, it is okay to turn your video off. You'll be able to listen to the meeting still while your video is off. You'll just have to remember to turn your video back on when you are participating. Turning your video off when you are not participating will help make sure that the active meeting participants can be seen on the screen. In some cases, we also will be able to turn people's video on and off, so if they are not actively participating, we can avoid distraction during the meeting. You can always turn your video back on. If you are participating by phone, you can click *6 to unmute your phone. For those using Zoom, somewhere on your screen, you will see a choice to toggle between speaker and gallery view. Speaker view shows the active speaker. Gallery view will let you see all participants. Board members and city staff members, remember to state your name and title each time you speak. All motions will need to be stated clearly. After a motion is made and seconded, the chair will call on the board members individually to provide their vote. Mr. Chair, you will then need to announce whether or not the motion carried and also the count of the vote. When public comment is sought on an item, individuals participating via Zoom should use the raise your hand feature. Windows and Mac users can access this feature through the participants button at the bottom of their screen. Android and iPhone users can access this feature through the More button located at the bottom right-hand corner of their screen. For those calling in by phone, you may dial *9. Individuals will be called upon by name in the order they appear on the meeting host screen. When you are called on, please unmute your listening device and state your name before speaking. The chair will then call for in-person public comment for those without access to technology options. Staff present will direct you to the podium to speak, following social distancing and safety protocols, and the regular 3-minute time limit will apply. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, everyone, for Monte Soukup chair. Sorry for being a little bit late. I had another meeting that kind of ran over with the chancellor and the lieutenant governor, so I couldn't just walk out in this case. So anyway, I finally made it. I think we are ready for open for public comment as I look at the agenda. Do we have anyone that has a public comment in this open period at the moment? Okay.
I am seeing nobody with their hand raised, and we also do not have anyone here in the commission room.
Okay. All right. Then seeing none, I'm going to close the public comment. We would have the next item would be to approve the minutes of the April 12th, 2021 meeting. Are there any comments on the minutes? Ron?
Mr. Chairman, Ron Gacious, Chamber nominee. I move adoption of the April minutes.
Thank you, Ron.
Mr. Chair, Thomas Howe, McGrew, Lawrence Border Realtors. I second that motion.
Excellent. So we have a motion to approve the minutes and a second. Is there any comment before we call a vote? Seeing none, I'm going to call the vote. Christina Gentry.
I approve.
Rebecca Buford.
Approve.
Shannon Ori.
Approve.
Thank you. Ron Gacious.
Approved.
Sarah Waters.
Approve.
Erica Zimmerman.
Approve.
Thomas Howe.
Aye.
Dana Ortiz.
Approve.
Okay. I believe that's everyone that's in attendance. Is that correct? Okay, motion passes 8-0 to approve the minutes. Did we introduce Leah? Has that been done? I don't see that as an agenda item, but it appears to me that we should do that.
We have not yet, but yes, we tried to introduce her at your last meeting before she officially started, but her headset batteries died before she would have a chance to say hello to you guys. So yes, we have Leah here. She'll be running the show here from here on out, but yes.
So this is just a last run for you running the show then?
Yeah. Somebody's got a t-shirt to run the show, so.
Leah, would you like to introduce yourself and give us a little bit about your background? I know maybe we didn't prepare you for this, but sure you could do that.
Sure. Good morning, friends. I'm Leah Roslin, and I believe this is going in my 3rd week in this new role, and I'm really excited to be here and to be working with all of you. I have been working in the community in health and human services for the past 4 years at the United Way of Douglas County. But before that, I had a career in Southern California in housing and human services for about 18 years. So again, I'm really excited to be here and doing this work with all of you. And I'm feeling really positive about the progress that we'll be able to make together. And thank you all so much for your service to our community through your service on this board.
Well, thank you. We're all looking forward to getting this Monte Soukup chair. Looking forward to getting to know you better and working with you over the next couple of years. So welcome aboard.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on to item C, agenda items. Kansas Open Meetings Act and Kansas Open Records Act refresher. I believe that's a staff update. Always a treat.
Good morning, Jeff Craig, Planning and Development Services. I will share my screen here and just give you a quick refresher on the Kansas Open Meetings Act and the Kansas Open Records Act that we have here. So bear with me one moment. I will get the share to go here. I think that's working correctly. All right. Well, the principle to the Kansas Open Meetings Act is that it's kind of doing the public's business. So the public has a right to know those information, and it's essential for an effective and functioning democratic process. So the purpose of COMA, as you can kind of see on the screen here, is to be, declare informal electorate, and also to make sure it's very transparent in the facts of what's going on behind the government and those items going through it. So we'll kind of go into a little bit of the details to that one. COMA applies when the body involved is a covered entity, and the Affordable Housing Advisory Board qualifies as a covered entity since it is doing work for the city, and there is a meeting. And the key with that one is that it has to be a meeting and the covered entity has to be applied. So in those instances, to all legislative and administrative bodies, which is what the Affordable Housing Advisory Board is, it does go into those divisions and COMA does apply. And also in the case of in which you receive and expend parts of public funds, which is clearly what Affordable Housing Advisory Board does with the NOFAs and the Housing Trust Fund items. So for a meeting to occur, 3 conditions must be met. The first is a gathering of the majority of the board members, an interactive communication in person, by telephone, or any other medium, as in the case of today's meeting, Zoom, under the emergency orders that we have in place, and the discussion of the business and the affairs of the body have to occur. So those 3 items must be present for a meeting to qualify as an open meeting. Or excuse me, as a meeting. And in the case of the Affordable Housing Advisory Board, for the 13 members that stage the board, a quorum is a membership of 7 present. Interactive communication is the key to this portion of the law. It applies in a couple of different instances here. Clearly applies when members are in physical presence. It also can include telephone calls, conference calls, video conferencing, and those items. It can also occur on social media. There has been a recent finding by the Kansas Attorney General that if members are posting on, in this case, it was on Facebook, in a virtually simultaneous fashion without providing a meeting and a notice agenda, that it would qualify as that item. And in that instance, the posts were found to violate COMA. So it's kind of keep in mind is that even if it's not a Zoom or FaceTime or a conference call, it can constitute an open meeting depending upon how many people are participating and the speed of which the communication is occurring. The other part of it was that they were discussing the business of the body. And so social gatherings, as you can see, are not subject to COMA as long as there is no discussion of the business of the body. The conferences are also maybe attended by more members as long as the specific business of the body is not discussed and is not by a majority of the Affordable Housing Advisory Board. So it's not necessarily something we kind of run into, but something we do want to let you all know is that a conference is a potential item of that one. So if there is some education or learning opportunities that do pop up, we would double check that and be aware of those things. I've already kind of mentioned a little bit about electronic communication, but it, does not, the fact that you send an email, to somebody does not necessarily constitute, but it's when a majority of the body uses the communication to engage in the interactive discussions that may rise to a COMA issue. You'll see a lot of times is the reply all button will be the culprit in these instances where someone will reply all and the whole board will be copied, and that'll be a COMA violation in the instance there. You'll also see generally from staff is that we structure the emails in ways that reply all is not available to you. So we kind of make that remove that when possible in the instance. But the key is if it's a large communication of that item, it goes to the whole board, that can be a COMA violation. And this is the one I kind of alluded to earlier, is that simultaneous Facebook posts concerning the business of the board can now constitute a COMA violation. The Kansas Attorney General had found that out during March of 2020 is when that kind of came out. About a recent governing body vote was engaged in a meeting, even though it was just merely a discussion that was occurring on a social media platform. So something to kind of keep in mind as you're seeing Facebook posts and those other things coming through. always important with that. Members are encouraged to act with caution, of course, when those instances do come up, and do keep in mind that, when you are posting, it may not seem like there is a quorum, but to be aware that there is a potential that could be out there in the open. We just mentioned about the emails things there, to avoid the reply all function. Best infographic on the slide right there. So. A serial meeting is a bit of a thing. It's serial or interactive communications of less than a majority that's permitted under COMA, but it can still constitute a COMA violation because collectively it could involve a majority of the membership of the body. They share a common topic in discussion, and they're intended for the participants to reach an agreement on a matter. You typically see this with, governing bodies and those kind of things, but it is possible, and same as the Affordable Housing Advisory Board, given some of your roles and functions that you have with that one. So a serial meeting is if, it's kind of the old telephone game. If party A talks to party B and tells them an item, and then party B talks to party C and relays that item on, and it goes down the line a couple more times, that is a serial meeting. So again, just to kind of keep that in mind, it is the body is involved as a covered entity, which the Affordable Housing Advisory Board is, and there is a meeting, which is a majority of the members, the interactive communication, and they're discussing the business of the body. So to keep that in mind for an Open Meetings Act, those three components must be in play.
Jeff, can you take a question?
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Ron Gacious, Chamber Representative. Back on your serial, like email communications, at the top it says a series of interactive communications of less than a majority is not permitted under COMA. But people communicate one-on-one back and forth all the time, correct?
Jeff Crick, Planning and Development Services, that is correct. The key is when you start roping in more parties and it becomes that game of telephone, if you will, where it's the old example I'll use is from our city attorney's office. If party A informs party B they're going to vote a certain way, and then party B informs party C that I'm voting this way and party A is voting that way, then that becomes a serial meeting.
Yeah, it's when the full chain of participation includes a majority of the membership of the body.
That is correct.
But if there were 3 of 13 people from AHAB communicating back and forth on email, and it stayed within that small group, that would be all right?
It can be. We may want to declare that as ex parte communication sometimes because it could affect the vote or be of an item of instance in those things. But, a communication between the chair and the vice chair about, how the ordering of an agenda doesn't necessarily rise to the level. But if it gets down to how I'm going to take a vote or how I view this particular applicant, that is when it starts to get into some very rocky territory in the way that the meetings work. So we always describe it in many ways. It's the difference between the action the board is taking and just the housekeeping of the board to make sure the meeting is orderly and run is really kind of those key items to watch for.
Okay, thank you.
Let's see. Oh, there we go. I think I was here, so I'll pick right back up from there. All meetings of a covered entity must be open to the public and proper notice must be given. And that's what we do with your agendas and through the iCompass website and kind of the links and available information. So we always post the agendas on iCompass about a week ahead of time of the meeting. That way the notice for your meeting is there. We also put on your agenda for the next 3 months of meetings at the bottom of it. So if you ever want to kind of keep up on the calendar, at the end of your agenda every month, we post the next 3 months worth of meeting dates so people are aware of those items. Meetings must be accessible and held in general public places, and that is why Leah and Dani are in the city commission room. So if someone would like to participate, they can go to the city commission room and have those items. That's also why before COVID, we would also have your meetings in the city commission rooms, not just for the telecommunications and the video presence, but because it has to be open to the public. And that way that would be conducted so the public can observe the proceedings of the meetings. Notice of the date, time, and place of any meetings, regular or special. And so we do kind of go through those, and we do, meet those with your agenda posting requirements. And we do keep those, we try to keep tabs on posting those about a week ahead of time of the meeting. COMA does not require that notice be given within any particular time frame, but we do strive to always post about a week ahead of time. And notice must first be requested before body is required to provide it. But what we typically do is we will post the agendas online to kind of make that available. So not necessarily something we run into. We just like to do that as a good practice. COMA also does not require an agenda be created, but if it is created and one does exist, we have to make it public and available, which we do through iCompass. And we also typically will print them out and have them available in the room during your normal meeting. Executive sessions are something you can have in some boards. The Affordable Housing Advisory Board doesn't typically recess into executive sessions, and we wouldn't anticipate you to have that as a meeting item. And if it does go down that course, we would involve the city attorney's office to help us make those details and go through those processes. So it is something that's there, but not something that is used for AHAB. So this is the part where I have to sound a little stern, and I will apologize. Is there possible ramifications of the COMA violations? The Attorney General, the district attorneys investigate for those violations, and they do kind of go through those compliance, and it's based on what's called a preponderance of evidence. And then if a violation is found, the AG can enter into a consent order with the agencies to enforce those items, which we have seen in some other municipalities recently. So there are, effects to those COMA violations, which is why we try to bring you a refresher every year for those items. They just keep you up to date on the latest trends, the news is on those things, and also just a reminder on the protocols as a whole. Consent order may impose civil penalties of up to $250 and require training. The district attorneys may impose court cost investigation and attorney fees if necessary. It can also result in the invalidation of the board's action, or in some instances, the removal from the position. So keep in mind that one. And as always, this is just a refresher. It was a very quick refresher at that. So if you have any questions about a Kansas Open Meeting Act or the Open Records Act, please let Leah know, and she will reach out to the city attorney's office and we'll be able to get you more specific information on that. But with that, I would be happy to answer any particular questions I can at least give a try for in the instance.
Jeff, Ron Gacius, I have a question.
Yes.
I'm coming back to my same question again because I'm legitimately confused. So if there is a 3-person email substantive discussion about an AHAB agenda item, and it does not go outside of 3 people, but it's a substantive policy discussion, is that an open meetings violation or not?
My understanding by the letter of the way COMA is written, it would not constitute that. However, if it was a substantial policy discussion like that, we would advise you to have those at the board as a meeting of the whole. That way, all parties are privy to the information and the answers that are provided to that, and it's also transparent to the public. So I don't think it necessarily rises to meet and violate COMA, but it may not be as transparent as what we might strive for at AHAB.
Well, if that's the standard, I've violated it almost every month of the 38 months that I've served on AHAB because I've engaged in outside conversations regarding substantive material that comes before AHAB with many of the other advisory board members. So I think you were correct when you said no. And you didn't need to add but we are interpreting things. I think you fall into the category of stifling speech if you presume to prohibit all one-on-one or two-on-one engagements by something less than what constitutes in total stream of the emails, something less than a majority of the advisory board. Now, maybe we should be reporting those conversations as ex parte conversations, and I'm completely willing to do that. I think it would be appropriate, perhaps, if that is the city's rule. But I just don't see how you can expect that, particularly amongst the nonprofit representatives that are rubbing elbows with each other every day of every week and talking about housing issues all the time. Many of those issues overlap with with the discussions of the advisory board. I don't see how you can expect them not to have conversations amongst each other. So, and I think that is an overly broad interpretation of the statutes. And I thought I was pretty familiar with them. My 2 cents.
And
Thank you, Ron.
I would just
Shannon?
add to that, as the convener for the housing, safe and affordable housing plank of the CHIP, those meetings, there are many of us who participate, including Dani, all the time. And we have conversations about the housing that we need in town all the time. So I agree with Ron. If that's the interpretation, I'm not sure those of us in the nonprofits can continue to do this, because we talk about it pretty much every meeting I go to.
Jeff Craig, Planning Development Services Director. I think that the key distinction is it's something that the board would take action on, not necessarily the topic of itself there. I think that's the key to keep in mind. If it's something that would be coming before the board or something the board will be taking action on, is different than it just talking about affordable housing as a topic or the CHIP or those kind of details. There may be some overlap in the instances there. But the key is to keep in mind is if it's going to be before the board for action or consideration, that is really when you're going to want to keep in mind those COMA items. And that's something we see with a lot of our other advisory boards too, is they're working in those fields and they have those specific instances. And we just want you to be very cautious about that. That's probably why we take a little bit more of a conservative approach to the instances to make sure that we keep everybody on the right side of that rule.
Shannon Lowry, Housing Authority. Jeff, can you go back to your first couple of slides? Because did you say that one of the items that makes you covered is if you allocate funds?
Bear with me one moment and I can pull that back up. Yes, one of the bodies that makes you a covered entity which is a body that receives or expends and are supported in whole and part by public funds.
Okay, well, we don't do that. We make recommendations to the city commission.
Correct. Jeff Craig, Planning Development Services. But the instance though is that recommendations can have some of those instances there. And Dani, correct me if I'm wrong here, but sometimes you do have some funding allocations that can also overlap into CDBG in those instances, I believe.
Dani Walters, yeah, and I mean, directly home would be something that you guys allocate to, so.
This is Diane, Stoddard, Assistant City Manager. I just wanted to jump in here. So all of the city advisory boards and committees are all covered by the Act. So I think that's important to note. All of those boards are covered by the Act. So that would include the Affordable Housing Advisory Board.
This is Monte, Soukup Chair. I just want to, by way of example, get a clarification. So let's say that we have a NOFA out and we have applications and all the board members have received the applications. Let's just hypothetically say I called Sarah to talk about the applications and we talked just one-on-one. Would that be okay if I have a single conversation with a single person about some board, about the applications that are in front of the board? Is that an okay conversation?
Jeff Craig, Planning and Development Services Director. My understanding of COMA is that would be okay. The question would be to watch for the serial meetings to develop.
Yes, but if I were to get on a conference call with Sarah, Shannon, and Dana, then we got a problem, right? That would clearly be a violation.
Jeff Craig, Planning and Development Services Director, probably need to consult the city attorney's office to be right on the instance there, but I believe because it's not a majority of, or excuse me, a quorum of the board, that may not rise to the same level of it, but it may start to get closer towards a serial meeting potential to be developed.
Okay. All right. So what I'm hearing out of that is one key thing to stay in mind is having individual conversations that don't escalate into conversations that involve multiple people on the board, involving board business. Okay, so one other question. Well, I've got the floor. Let's say we have, our not-for-profit providers that are working together. There's a NOFA out, and we have our not-for-profit providers that are, maybe they're working together. Maybe 3 or 4 of them are working together on a project to submit into the NOFA for funding. Is it okay for them to meet talking about their submission? They're not talking about board business, and they will be recused from voting and even talking about these things. Is that an issue that we need to be concerned about?
Jeff Crick, Planning and Development Services. In that instance, no, because they would be recusing from the board, and it's also more of a function of their work in the sector, not as sitting on the board as an actionable item.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate that clarification.
And Jeff Crick, Planning and Development Services, if I may. And of course, with all these questions pop up there, do keep in mind, I am not an attorney by trade, but if you have a question about those, we can definitely refer to the city attorney's office to get you definitive information on those instances.
Okay, are there any, Ron, I see, go ahead.
I gotta hit this nail on the head with my hammer one more time. I'm looking at the summary of the Open Meetings Act prepared by Kansas Legislative Research, and under serial meetings, it says, the Attorney General has said serial communications among a majority of a quorum of a public body constitute a meeting if the purpose is to discuss a common topic of business or affairs of that body by the members. A majority of a quorum. So our quorum is 7. A majority of a quorum would be 4. So serial communications with 4 or more would be prohibited under the Act. But communications with 1, 2, or 3 would be allowed.
Okay, it's Monte, Soukup Chair. Are there any other questions, clarifications from the board members or staff? All right, I'm looking around the room, seeing none. We're going to go on to the next agenda item. We have quick updates. The Kansas Department of Aging and Disability Services Housing and Homeless Summit Summary.
This is Dani Walters. I can take this one. There's really not a whole lot to report on this item. We just wanted to make you guys aware of the fact that we did have several staff in attendance at this, and I believe that there were also a few board members that kind of popped in and out at different times as well. The point of it was essentially to kind of put ourselves in a position to be able to, I guess, move swiftly is the best way to put it, on some federal funding that's coming down from the latest stimulus package. So it was put on by KDADS and then facilitated by Wichita State. And there was a lot of breakout groups, a lot of discussion, and then I think they're going to compile kind of all of that information, and hopefully it will eventually lead us to a clear roadmap in order to really look at how to strategically spend those dollars. So, and if anybody else who was there wants to jump in, that's just kind of my general overview of what it was. We just wanted to make you aware that we've got some representation in there as part of that conversation. So.
This is Monte, Soukup Chair. Do we have any other comments on that? This is Monte, Soukup Chair. I attended a couple of those little sessions and thought that was some pretty good information. I also wanted to touch on, and I think related to the funding associated with this, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe I heard Mayor Finkeldye commit to trying to end homelessness in Lawrence with some of this funding and the Built for Zero and that. And I would like, how is that part of this funding that you're talking about? And how do you think that impacts this group's work, if at all?
Dani Walters, Planning and Development Services. Part of the funding that's coming down is additional home funds. We do not have guidance on those yet, and in terms of what exactly it can be spent on. They have indicated, they meaning HUD, has indicated that they would like this to go towards homelessness and the activities for those that are experiencing homelessness. Until we know exactly what we can spend it on, because home is pretty tight in what you can spend the money on. So we're not sure really about what the flexibilities might look like with this or exactly what we'll be able to spend it on. What I also don't know is if it's going to end up being some kind of application process, or if, you know, the city's going to go through a process to kind of determine where they would like to see those funds go. So my inkling would be if it hits the level of a competitive application, that the AHAB may have some involvement in that recommendation process. Now, the AHAB can certainly weigh in on, you know, that's what you're here for. So you can weigh in on any potential projects or anything like that you would like to see. And we will definitely bring that information to you as soon as we get it. We just know that we're getting, I think, around 1.6 million. And again, what we can do with that, we're not 100% sure yet. So they said guidance should come out in the next few months. So hopefully that answers your question, but that's.
Thank you. Appreciate Monte Soukup Chair. Appreciate that. I guess my only comment is I hope that, and I'll get to you, Rebecca, here in just a second. Is that, you know, if we do end up creating applications or processes, that we don't create them in a way that makes it difficult for those, you know, that have accessibility, you know, internet accessibility issues, or, you know, just we don't create barriers for the people we're trying to help. That would be my only hope, that we get that money spent and we get it to the people that they need, and quickly and without a lot of barriers. So, Rebecca
Buford. I just wanted to ask Dani, what's your plan on, I know it's always a waiting game for HUD rules and what flexibility, you know, if there'll be special flexibilities or not, and how we interpret those. But when you do get some of that priority, how are you planning on letting the public know about that process?
Dani Walters, Planning and Development Services. That is a discussion that we haven't had yet. Community development most definitely administers the funding for home, but I am not sure of what the plan is for how that money will be spent. So those are discussions that we still have to have. We are still several months out from getting any kind of guidance on it, but yeah, we will definitely let that information out to the public as soon as we know it. So, and I think it's such a larger community conversation that I think that this group will be kind of cued in on that, as well as those conversations are happening in the community. So.
Okay, good. Monte Soukup Chair, are there any other comments on this before we move on? Oh, yeah, Shannon.
The only thing I'd like to say is, I think all of us are in multiple groups where money's coming to town. And my only sort of policy comment is, let's don't create some things that then the following year or the year after we can't support. And that some of the things that we should be thinking of, is there a way to use this one-time money that moves us forward without then creating a huge hole, thereby making all of our jobs much harder the following year.
This is Dani Walters. Thank you, Shannon. That is such an important point. That is one that we've been talking about. The Emergency Solutions Grant rehousing money that's in the community, is that this is one-time funding. And it's great to be able to, support someone in housing with this funding, but then what happens down the road when they need continued support and we don't have this influx of funding? So that was something that was covered at the Homeless and Housing Summit as well, is not to set a program up for failure because we don't have a plan for sustaining that funding. So definitely conversations that are happening.
That's Monte, Soukup Chair. Thank you. Great comment, Shannon. Seeing no other comments, we're going to move on to the next.
Hi, Monte.
Yeah.
Board Chair. Hi, I'm sorry. I'm just trying to find my raise hand button. Hi, Christina Gentry here, subsidized housing rep. I also appreciate the conversation, especially as we dive into what has been created by conversations happening in other small groups that are focusing on the issues. I find it also to be, HUD being as restrictive as it can be. I also would like to know a little bit of how our influence from some of the conversations that we've had internally, and then also the broader conversations that have been happening in our community, as we realize that some of the barriers to accessing some funds could be having or not having a 501c3 status, or understanding that we need to have a built-in BIPOC, like a board leadership as we talk about priorities for our applicants, and looking forward to moving and shifting in a way that is really focused on equity. So I'm wondering also if anyone who was part of that conversation can have a little bit or can share a little bit of the conversation that maybe was something new that you haven't heard HUD speaking on, or representatives speaking on, as it pertains to what we've understood about our community, especially as we dive into diversity and equity and inclusion. So, I'm with Monte on how we can prevent barriers, but what about the barriers that we've understood that existed, and how can we be influential in making sure that HUD dollars are going to be moving in that effort to sustain those, barriers that we understand that exist, to not exist for this upcoming funds. So maybe that's not a question, it's more of a comment of how we can be influential in making sure that this is still going to be sustainable as far as what we understand sustainable to be today.
Thanks, Monte, Soukup Chair. Thank you, Christina. It's an important subject. We certainly need to pay attention to it. So are there other, Dana.
Thank you. Sorry, having Wi-Fi problems at the day center. To Christina's point, also clear for the board to understand that homelessness is defined differently by HUD, and so HUD funding is very narrow, and 60% of the families year after year that are served by Family Promise do not qualify for some of the HUD funds that might be coming down and that come down routinely, such as ESG funding and such, merely because they might be couch surfing or staying with relatives and friends and doubled up. And so they do not qualify for rapid rehousing and things like that. So there are a lot of, even though the funding dollars might be coming, it's really important and critical to have people at the table that can understand the things that are the barriers and understand how we could work around them as a community and really meet folks where they are and understand the complexity of the situation. Thank you.
Monte, Soukup Chair. Thank you, Dana. Appreciate that. I'm wondering, you know, the city has this enormous task in front of them. They're in the county. We're going to get this funding and to figure out how to best utilize it and have the greatest impact. I don't know how our group plays into that, but, you know, certainly at some point, a discussion about what the greatest needs and where we can have the most impact could come from a lot of the people on this committee. So I guess short of having it as a topic for this group, which we could do, I would obviously encourage, you know, our not-for-profit providers to, you know, be in close touch with the city, with Leah and Dani, so we can, you know, have those conversations and try to get that money going to the right places. So yeah, Dana, go ahead.
Dana Ortiz, Family Promise of Lawrence. And to Christina's point, also community organizers and such. We need
Right.
to include all voices. Thank you.
Monte, Soukup Chair, thank you for correcting me, Dana. That is very true. Okay, any other comments before we move on to the next topic? Okay, we are going to move on to the City Commission work session on the system of services supporting people experiencing homelessness. There was a video. Did anybody have comments on that video? Okay, seeing none, we're going to move on to the City Commission agenda item report. Dani, did you guys have something prepared for this, or is this?
This is Dani Walters. That actually went with the video. That was
Okay.
just the report that accompanied the agenda item that accompanied the video of the meeting.
Okay. All right, so are there any comments on that document and the video?
This is Christina Gentry, subsidized housing rep. I wanted to expand or just kind of maybe have a conversation about item number one on the executive summary of the City Commission's April 13, 2021 agenda item report. So sorry, I'm reading as I'm talking to you. Number one reads, city employees' interactions with people experiencing homelessness in parks, downtown, and other areas. So I believe maybe the videos talks a little bit and gives a little bit more context about what that item number one represents on this space. I'm just curious about other city employees or other people here in this group, maybe who have experiences being downtown and have had some interaction with our homeless or our housing insecure population in parks and downtown and other areas that maybe we can expand upon here in this group. I don't think it's not warrant of a conversation, especially since our city was talking about this and gave a video. If there's maybe some talk or some communication that we could have about giving a little bit of the narrative of what that looks like for our city, I would like to have that, explore that here if we could.
Monte, Soukup Chair. I guess I'm happy to have that conversation. I'm not sure exactly what you're looking for, Christina. So I'm not sure how to react to that.
No problem. And I understand, we all have different perspectives, and I really do appreciate, sometimes having to explain, what it is I'm saying and try to make sure I give context for that reason. I do want to maybe share an experience I had recently downtown. I had my very first meeting with our Director of Equity and Inclusion. We were walking and, trying to make sure we had space to make a meeting. For most of us, we use a public library and use spaces and open spaces to kind of meet with each other and find a space that's on a safe turf, that we all recognize to be something that we interact with quite often. But the meeting places inside of the library were all closed off to the public. And so with that, it makes it very hard and very difficult to kind of interact with the public or make any kind of exchange that would be, in a way of just meeting and trying to see where we could do to improve our community. So the director of equity inclusion and I were outside on a park bench in front of the library where the bus depot interacts and quite often runs. What I did recognize was that we have a population who are transient, who are coming to an understanding that there is almost a fight or a discourse that is a little bit of an alarming discourse that has to do with property. And there was an interaction between two males and a fight broke out and ensued. But what I really listened to in that interaction was that there were two people who were arguing over their property. And that really kind of resonated with me, that we have in all of the community that we have, two people who are really just wanting to take ownership of what belongs to them and keep, things like their backpack and full of IDs, social security cards, any kind of snacks or any kind of things that would help them maintain throughout the day, water bottles and whatnot, So that with me resonated in how our community, one, interacts with our homeless or housing insecure community in a way that almost like polices or makes it so it's very difficult for a person to hold on to a piece of property that belongs to them, because I'll probably more explanation needed to be that there was police who came and there's an interaction and the police were called. So with that incident, it lasted maybe 10 minutes, but it was an interaction of just the two people wanting to understand how to keep hold of their own property. And then the police were called and it was, what ensued after that was to me felt like a violation of how we deal with citizen issues and problems, how we could do better with not involving police into these interactions, when it really comes down to how we can better understand our community by doing it a service to provide counseling and protection and, really a sense of humanitarianism, and calling police on those issues really doesn't do that. So with that one item, city employees interactions, I just wanted to share mine because I think that's important to note that what we're trying to do here is give people a sense and give everyone a sense of having a place to put their things and having a sense of ownership and having a place that they feel safe, that they can hold and put their things to the side so they can continue on with their day. So yeah, that was a little bit of how I interacted with our downtown housing insecure population. And there were more people who had any kind of similar narratives or similar stories. I think that's really why we are moved to be here in this space, is to continue to provide a sense of a way to someone to call home and not have to continuously fight over just the things that are needed for survival. So with that being said, I'll stop there.
Monte, Soukup Chair, thank you for sharing that. I'm sure that's, all of us, I'm sure when we're downtowns, I know I do, struggle with empathy and then not understanding what, a person that's living on the street, what their life is like. I haven't experienced that, so I don't think I can really truly understand that. And, when I always struggle with, at one point you want to help them, and then at the other side, you don't know if there are people that are trying to take advantage of the situation either. So I certainly have my interaction, I guess, with people is always a struggle on what to do when, you encounter someone on the street that's clearly struggling in some way. So the other thing I took from your story is, to me, is a need that are to, I don't know if reform is the right word, but certainly retrain how our police interact with people, all people. We're seeing that across the country. We need to have more, in my opinion, at least. They need to be more like social workers and try to de-escalate situations and resolve them peacefully without hauling people off or humiliating people or putting them in compromising positions. So certainly that's something that probably outside the realm of this group, but certainly we all struggle with. Is there anyone else that has any? Yeah, Thomas.
So just to comment on that from my perspective, which is that it goes to, and the phrase has been defund the police, but perhaps more rearrange how the funding works for social services. So the person who came to work with that situation should not have been a law enforcement officer, because that's not likely that there was a law enforcement violation there. Instead, some form of a counselor or a mediator who could help people work through those kind of things. But it's not something that our society currently has in place. It's something that we really need to figure out. How do we redirect our tax dollars, our funds, to appropriate interactions with populace, whether it's homeless populace, whoever it happens to be. So it is a very large question. It's something we need to address. I'm not sure that the Affordable Housing Advisory Board addresses it specifically, but it's absolutely a societal issue that we need to fix.
Yes, Monte Soukup, Chair. Oh, go ahead, Rebecca.
Rebecca Buford, with Tenants to Homers. I think that what we're talking about is supportive service housing in our silo of affordable housing, which is what we need in all sorts of forms, I feel. And I think there's a lot of really good local grassroots discussions and among the grassroots organizations that do this of what does that look like? And we absolutely don't have enough of those units or of those supports. So I would urge this group, as we look at funding moving forward, that we really consider those as priorities, because there is a real gap in, if you don't have supportive service housing and the counselors and the people who provide those supports in the community working, your only option is to address homelessness with police action. I don't want to say only, but there aren't a lot of options. And I'm not excusing that. There's no reason there should be police action, but we need to create and fund the services that we want to see as an alternative to that. And I think there's a lot of discussion about that and about new funding sources for that. I know the Lawrence Shelter is really looking at how do we, make shelter an absolute working temporary emergency shelter, but that we really move people out of there within 30 to 90 days to supportive service housing. And so that's the goal I would focus this group on, in that silo of the housing for those that are sometimes hardest to house and struggling with some of the most obstacles is how do we create services and interactions that are empowering and, as Christina pointed out, give them a place to, allow them to have a place to call home. And really that is different types of units that we don't have enough of. So we're really trying to look at some of this new funding source to create some of those options for people. And I think the discussion is happening. It just needs to continue at a bigger level.
This is Monte Soukup, Chair. Thank you for those comments, Rebecca. Next month we have a discussion about our NOFA and one of the things that we could do, in the past we have always sent out a NOFA and say we want affordable housing projects, right? We could seriously think about trying to narrow our ask. If this is if we have a discussion and this board decides that those kind of units are something that we want, we could specifically request, responses to our NOFA to address some of those issues, whether that's the funding we have or the federal funding that's coming or whatever. We could certainly make a statement about that an acknowledgement of the need for the specific types of services and structures or whatever it is we would need. So I might suggest that people on the board think about that, and that next month we start having some of those conversations. Shannon?
Yeah, Shannon Lowry, Housing Authority. One of the things we've had conversations before is separating out a voucher / service type funding and
Right.
capital type requests. And I would just like that to specifically be on the agenda, because I think it puts those of us who make a request at a disadvantage and doesn't allow us to participate on things that really we're not competing for, that it's a very different type of project.
This Monte Soukup Chair, I'm just going to clarify what you said to make sure I understood that correctly. So you're asking that we send out the NOFA have two separate categories, one for services and one for housing units or product or whatever, or improvements. And then what I heard, but I didn't explicitly hear you say, was that if, let's say, for instance, you were submitting on the voucher side, that you could then, since you would not be competing with the housing products, that you could then sit in on the conversation for the other NOFA responses for the other types of products. Is that what is that
Correct?
clear? Is that what you
Correct.
asked?
And in our last, we had a set aside for, we're going to put the majority towards capital projects. We had a set aside for services / voucher type vehicles. And I think that's fine. I mean, I support primarily what we're doing here is trying to get units on the ground, but those are very different things. And it's almost impossible. We've tried to work that matrix around a million times and try to judge a service / voucher against a capital project. And I think at least the last round, we decided that doesn't really work because it's very hard. And if we're not going to compare them, we're going to have two separate funding pots of money. Then if somebody on the board doesn't have a request in one of them, they shouldn't be excluded from participating in just that one, not one that would have their grant application in it.
Monte Soukup Chair, I really like that idea. I guess I'm going to ask the staff to figure out if that is possible. That if we do separate those two funds and they're not competing, can we have people stay on? And I don't need an answer now, but maybe by next month you guys could talk to the city attorney and figure out if that is something that we can do. Because prior to now, I mean, we haven't been able to do that, obviously. Are there any other comments, questions? Okay, moving on to item D, other new business. We don't have any other new business unless someone has something to bring up. Okay, Rebecca?
Last month, the Sexual Violence Prevention Group sent us a really great letter on some issues regarding, again, opening possible ordinance or policy. And I know there's a continued debate on whether we can do that legally, but there was several good suggestions on some policy work on trying to, allow for access to vouchers for landlords to have to accept them, or even some other ideas that were listed, and I don't have it in front of me, but I think we should look at that letter written to us by the Sexual Violence Prevention Housing Committee. And I will say I am on that committee, and several of us are, so I want to be clear about that, but that there's some really good discussion and research going on with that I think they would love for us to look at and maybe take to the next level as the Affordable Housing Advisory Board. So I know there's still some more discussion on those, or what makes the most sense of that, but we kind of we accepted that letter and then we didn't really talk about that. So I would like to suggest to put that on a upcoming agenda as well.
This Monte Soukup chair, I think we can do that. I don't know any reason we can't. Go ahead, Erica.
Are you going to ask for anything else? I have something
that's
not
sure.
related to that.
Well,
I was just a little surprised to not see on the agenda just a kind of a debrief from our meeting last month with the Planning Commission. But I just kind of similar to what Rebecca was saying, they also talked about, what I kept hearing was bring something to us. And that just kind of motivated me and to, again, just bring up the discussion of policy and zoning and codes, and inclusionary zoning was thrown out. And I know we wrote a letter asking for some support on that. But like Rebecca, I would just like, maybe not now, because there's a lot of things that we're working, but maybe in a couple months, I'll bring this back up again, just to put some of those big policy issues on our agenda so we can have those conversations and take something to the Planning Commission like they kept asking.
Okay, it's Monte Soukup chair. Thank you, Erica. Rebecca has her hand up here.
I just wanted to mention one thing, and I'm not sure, just to announce that I know the Board of Realtors and the Lawrence Home Builders Association, which have presented some things to us, and I know the Lawrence Home Builders Association had a letter in last month's meeting as well that we really didn't address, but that they are having a study session next week on May 18th with the City Commission. So, I think there's some overlap in things that this board certainly agrees with on the need for affordable housing and policy change. There's certainly some issues of complete deregulation that are often suggested that I'm not sure that we do agree with. But again, it's a discussion happening that I think we have to have a part in. I will be they did request a presentation on affordable housing and trying to be fair on that. So I'm going to speak to a little bit of the real estate realities to home ownership, affordable home ownership housing, which again kind of opens up other rental housing and lets people move out of subsidized housing and build wealth, which is an equity issue that I am familiar with. Again, want to stay in my silo, but again, there may be options to be present at that study session too, and talk to, all of the ways that this group and our work is trying to address affordable housing. And I guess I strongly support some of the supply, some of the regulations that many say are stopping an expansive supply, but those that are really forcing people to have discussions on how do we integrate affordable units in new development. And so I hate for that discussion to be taken out of the realm, with this idea of we can't control, we need to let supply have free reign or make as much supply as possible. I would also argue that we can create some supply in affordable housing with our funding sources and with the building capacity in the affordable housing sector, whatever that may look like. So there's a lot of good discussion going on. I just wanted to announce that to everyone here. And if anyone's interested in presenting or talking more, please let me know.
Monte Soukup chair, could we have Dani or Leah, could you send that meeting date information out to this board so that we can, or is it on the city website?
This is Dani Walters. We will find the information.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then Dana had her hand up.
Yeah, thank you. Just to follow up with what Erica and Rebecca both were saying, there's a lot of good discussions, and if we can figure out ways that we can really impact the broader view of building affordable housing, simply the double density initiative that Tenants to Homeowners was really instrumental in helping, has opened up a view for funding sources for me personally by applying for grants where we could do a property flip and perhaps qualify for another affordable unit. That is not related directly to the AHAB group, but because of a new policy and an opening up, it widens the work of the Affordable Housing Advisory Board. So I think that the more we can spend time on those kinds of front-end issues, the more creatively we'll have more affordable housing options in our community. Thank you. Dana Ortiz, Family Promise of Lawrence.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Diane Stoddard, Assistant City Manager. I just wanted to mention, because the topic of regulation had come up, and also the upcoming work session that will deal with housing, more broadly. One of the things that we shared with the commission is our desire to relook at the city's development code with an eye toward affordable housing, and also, other issues. Our code is fairly complicated, and we see a lot of benefit in relooking at the code and doing kind of an overhaul really of the code with an eye toward various policy goals, but one of them being the affordable housing issue. So we will be moving forward with looking at the code, and certainly keep you all and other stakeholders apprised. There's a lot of stakeholders that are going to be involved in those discussions, but as that proceeds, there'll be, I think, a lot of opportunity for us to look at maybe how do we see our development code and zoning differently if we want to achieve certain policy goals with our regulation that we have at the city.
This is Christina, Gentry. Monte, I'm sorry, I didn't want to cut you off. I just wanted, we're doing shout outs, and we're doing upcoming events and giving a little bit of a notice on something coming up in our community. Christina Gentry, subsidized housing rep. I was able to attend a Lawrence Community Shelter meeting called Good Neighbor. And so the update on that would be the 5/15, which is this Friday, would be a dedication to the Monarch Village. The Monarch Village homes were the small compact homes that were, as a result of our talks, a little bit of subsidized funding went to support this effort. So this 15th of May, they will be hosting a tour from 12 to 3 p.m. And so this is, it kind of falls in line with a lot of what Dana was talking about, but front end work, and provides supports for rental housing and for families and individuals in a way that we're seeing how this is done actionably and immediately. So I just wanted to put that on you guys' radar in case you're interested.
Monte Soukup Chair. Thank you, Christina. I saw Dana had a thumbs up on that. So thanks for letting us know about that event. Hopefully some of us can attend and see that.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
This is Leah Roseland, Affordable Housing Administrator. I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't losing anything in everyone's discussion. So I have for the next month and for the upcoming agenda items to go back to the Sexual Violence Prevention Housing Subcommittee public comment letter and take a look at some of those recommendations that were made. And then to also perhaps have some more discussion or some study sessions regarding other policy items that may be discussed in the study or work session with the commission some of the development, city development code, zoning and regulation items. Am I hearing that correctly from the board?
This is Monte, Soukup chair. I think so. I think what I pulled out of that is, maybe we need to have some kind of work session where we determine what policies, we look at these policies that people are presenting and we determine what we think are good ones to push forward and make recommendations or advisory letters or whatever that would be to the commission, so that we're taking some action on those things that we want to see promoted. Is that fair? Okay. Anything else on new business or reports or updates? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to close new business. The next item on our agenda is the calendar. So next month, we're looking at the NOFA timeline and the application matrix. I think we'll have that discussion that Shannon requested about whether we can create separate pots of funding so that we can have people participate, in parts of discussions. Anything else on that meeting? And then July 12th and August 9th are the following meetings after that. And I think with that, it concludes our agenda for today. Do we need a motion or anything to end the meeting? I can never remember. I'm sorry.
This is Dani Walters with Planning and Development Services. Yes. If
Okay,
you could do a formal motion, that'd be great.
I would accept a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman, Ron Gacious, Chamber Representative, I move we adjourn.
Okay, I have a second.
Second.
Okay, Shannon seconds. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the roll. Christina Gentry,
Yes.
Rebecca Buford,
Yes.
Shannon Ori,
Yes.
Ron Gacious,
Yes.
Sarah Waters,
Sorry, yes.
Erica Zimmerman,
Yes.
Thomas Howe,
Yes.
Dana Ortiz,
Yes.
Monte Soukup, yes. Motion passes 9-0. So we're adjourned. Thank you, guys. Looks like I had a busy.
Will be.
All right, thanks.